Maria moved quietly through the halls of Ridgewood Estate, the place she had worked in for almost 2 years. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, slipping into the mansion like a shadow and beginning her tasks long before anyone woke. She dusted the shelves, polished the marble floor, and cleaned rooms so large she sometimes felt like she was walking through a museum, not a home. She was used to this silence. It was a part of her life now, something she had learned to accept. The estate was beautiful, filled with chandeliers, grand staircases, and tall windows that let in soft golden light whenever morning finally reached the city. But for Maria, beauty didn't change the reality of things. She was here to work, not to belong. The millionaire who owned the house, Mr. Wetmore, rarely spoke to her. He lived in a world far above hers, a world she only glimpsed when she brought him tea or tidied up his office. He walked with quick steps, spoke in short sentences, and never looked like he had time for anything except business calls and meetings that stretched late into the night. Maria didn't expect him to notice her. Most people didn't, but she didn't mind the quiet. She preferred it. Silence gave her space to think, even if thinking sometimes hurt. She often remembered the life she once hoped for, a life filled with music, audiences, and bright stage lights. She had trained for years, practicing every day until her fingers were sore. Music was the one thing that made sense to her, the one thing that made her feel free and alive. But that life had been interrupted suddenly, shattered by circumstances that pushed her into work she never imagined doing. She didn't talk about it, not to anyone. Some memories were too heavy to share. Still, whenever she passed by the grand hall where the old piano stood, she felt something stir inside her. It was an antique Steinway, polished to shine like a mirror, sitting at the center of the room as if waiting for someone who would never come. Maria always paused for a moment when she walked by. She would look at the keys, at the smooth wooden body of the instrument, and feel her heart pull toward it, but she knew better than to touch it. It belonged to a world she no longer lived in. Her days followed routine. Clean the downstairs, fix the library, wash the glass doors, then move upstairs. Every room had its place, every object had its order, and Maria had learned all of it. She moved carefully, always making sure she left no sign that she had been there. Sometimes the other staff joked lightly that she was too quiet, too gentle, as if she was afraid of breaking the air around her. But to Maria, silence felt safe. On this particular morning, the estate was emptier than usual. Most of the household staff had taken the day off because Mr. Wetmore was expected to be away for the entire afternoon and evening for a business trip. That left only Maria to take care of the final cleaning tasks. Before locking up, the air felt different, calm, unrushed. For once, she didn't have to hurry. She moved into the grand hall with a soft cloth in her hand, ready to dust the shelves and wipe down the furniture. As she stepped in, her eyes drifted automatically toward the piano. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, falling across the instrument, making the black surface glow. Maria stopped walking. She didn't know why she paused longer than usual, but something felt warm inside her chest. She took a slow breath. Then another dot, her steps moved her closer before she even realized it. She set her cleaning cloth down on a nearby table and gently placed her fingertips on the edge of the piano. She wasn't playing it, just touching it. The wood felt cool and smooth under her fingers. Memories rushed back, memories she tried so hard to tuck away. Her childhood lessons, her first recital, the way her father used to smile from the audience, the hours she spent practicing scales until her fingers ached, the dreams she once believed were waiting for her. She closed her eyes for a moment, then she let out a soft breath, one filled with longing. She rarely allowed herself to feel. Maria knew she shouldn't open the piano. She knew she shouldn't sit at it. She knew she shouldn't even be thinking of it. But the hall was empty. The house was quiet. And for a moment, she wasn't a maid. She was someone who used to love music with her whole heart. She slowly lifted the cover off the keys. The white and black keys looked untouched, perfect, pure. They seemed to call to her. Just one note, she told herself. One single note wouldn't hurt anything. She pressed her finger down gently. A soft sound filled the air, warm and fragile. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It had been so long. Too long. Her other hand rose without her thinking, and before she knew it, she was sitting on the piano bench. She sat carefully, as if afraid the bench might disappear under her. She placed both hands on the keys and waited. Her heart beat faster, but in the most comforting way, she pressed a few more keys, letting small, scattered notes float around the empty hall. The sound was gentle, almost like the piano itself was waking up after a long sleep. She closed her eyes and began to play dot at first. The music was soft, unsure, like a whisper. But slowly, the melody grew clearer, fuller. Her fingers started remembering every chord, every pause, every rise and fall of the tune she once wrote. It wasn't a famous piece. It wasn't something the world knew. It was a song she created during a hard season in her life. A song that became her way of breathing when everything felt heavy. The melody drifted into the air like a warm memory, filling the empty spaces in the tall hall. The notes rose gently and then dipped into soft sadness before rising again with quiet hope. Every sound carried a piece of her heart. For the first time in years, Maria felt like herself again. She played with closed eyes, letting the piano speak the words she never could. Her body relaxed, her fingers moved naturally, and she felt every emotion she had locked away slowly loosen. Inside her, she didn't hear the door open. She didn't hear the footsteps. She didn't notice that she was no longer alone. All she heard was her music soft, full of emotion, floating through the mansion like a forgotten dream. She didn't know that someone was standing at the doorway. She didn't know that this moment, this simple act of letting herself play again, would change her life in ways she never imagined. For now, she simply played, unaware of the eyes watching her, and unaware of how close she was to a turning point she never saw coming. Maria didn't know how long she had been playing. Time didn't seem to follow its normal rhythm when her hands touched the piano keys. Every note felt like a breath she had been holding for years, finally released into the open air. The hall around her faded away. The world outside the mansion disappeared. For the first time since she started working at Ridgewood Estate, she felt free. Her fingers moved with a natural ease she thought she had lost forever. At first, the melody had been soft and uncertain, but now it flowed like a river that had been quietly waiting behind a dam. She could feel her heartbeat match the tempo she once practiced every day. Her posture straightened without thinking, her shoulders relaxed, and her mind drifted to places she hadn't visited in a long time. She remembered early mornings spent at a public music center, playing worn-out pianos that still held magic. She remembered staying after hours, studying sheet music under dim lights. She remembered building a dream that once felt close enough to touch, but life had changed too suddenly. A single moment, a sudden shift in her family's circumstances, had taken her dreams and replaced them with responsibilities. She had accepted work wherever she could find it, and music slowly slipped away from her daily life, until it felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Now, sitting at the piano inside this grand mansion, she felt that lost part of herself rise again. The melody she played was one she had written during the most difficult time of her life. It had no title. She simply called it her quiet song. The notes carried feelings she never had the courage to speak aloud: loss, grief, hope, and the wish for a better tomorrow. Her fingers brushed across the keys, and the hall filled with warm echoes. Sunlight danced across the polished floor, as if reacting to the sound. Even the stillness in the room seemed to lean in to listen, but something else was listening too. Mr. Wentmore had returned earlier than expected. His meeting had been canceled last minute, and he decided to come back home to finish paperwork before leaving again. He walked through the front entrance with his usual hurried steps, already thinking of the calls he needed to make. But before he reached his office, he stopped. Music drifted down the hallway, soft, emotional, unlike anything he had heard inside his house for years. He frowned slightly, puzzled. No one was supposed to be there except the cleaning staff, and none of them had ever shown interest in the piano. He stood still, listening. The melody wasn't random. It wasn't the kind of tune a beginner played. It was full of feeling, shaped with purpose, created with skill and emotion that couldn't be faked. Whoever was playing wasn't just pressing keys, they were speaking through them. Without thinking, he followed the sound. His footsteps slowed as he approached the grand hall. He didn't want to interrupt the music. Something in it pulled him forward, almost against his will. He reached the doorway and stopped before stepping inside. What he saw left him genuinely stunned. Maria sat at the piano, her eyes closed, her face calm, yet filled with emotion. Her fingers moved confidently, dancing across the keys with a grace he wouldn't have expected from someone who spent her days cleaning floors and dusting shelves. He had seen her 100 times, but he had never really seen her. The woman at the piano looked different, not because of the light or the setting, but because she had stepped into a world that was completely her own. Her movements were gentle yet strong, precise yet full of life. A sound she created felt too big for the room, too real, too human. He stood frozen at the doorway. He didn't dare interrupt. Maria continued playing, unaware of his presence. The melody dipped into a soft sadness, then rose again with a quiet hopefulness that made Mr. Wentmore's chest tighten. He didn't know why it affected him so deeply. He wasn't someone easily moved. His life revolved around numbers, deals, meetings, and schedules. Music had never been a part of his routine, but this was different. There was something raw about the way Maria played, something honest. It was as if she was sharing pieces of a story without saying a single word. For a moment, he forgot about his business trip. He forgot about the documents waiting in his office. He forgot about everything except the music. Maria shifted into the second part of her melody, letting the notes rise a little higher, filling the room with warmth. She didn't know why, but today the music came easier. Maybe it was the emptiness of the house. Maybe it was the quiet afternoon sun. Maybe it was because she had spent so long holding her feelings inside that they finally had nowhere left to hide. Her mind drifted to memories she rarely touched. The last time she performed in front of people. The last time she believed she had a future in music. The last time she felt proud of herself. The music softened again, becoming almost a whisper. She leaned forward slightly, not in tension but in affection. As if the piano were an old friend she was finally visiting after years apart. A tear slipped from her eye, though she didn't open her eyes or pause the melody. She wiped it away quickly, letting her fingers continue. At the doorway, Mr. Wentmore noticed. He had always been a man who kept his distance from emotional situations. He didn't know how to handle them. But seeing Maria's quiet tears and hearing the sadness woven into her music made something shift inside him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was something deeper, a realization that this woman, who moved silently through his home every day, had a world of her own he had never cared to imagine. For the first time, he wondered who she really was. The melody slowed, moving toward the final notes. Maria took a deep breath, letting the last few sounds linger in the air before gently lifting her hands off the keys. The room fell silent. She sat there for a moment, eyes still closed, savoring the last feeling of the music. She felt lighter somehow, more complete. It had been years since she allowed herself to play this way, and she didn't want the moment to end. She opened her eyes, and froze at the doorway. Stood Mr. Wentmore, her breath caught in her chest. Stood up immediately, stepping back from the piano as if she had done something unforgivable. Her hands shook slightly, and her heart raced with panic. "I'm so sorry." "Sir," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to touch your piano. I'm sorry. I'll get back to work." She lowered her head, expecting anger, disappointment, or a harsh warning. She waited for him to tell her she had crossed a line, but no such words came. Mr. Wentmore didn't speak at first. He didn't move either. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable, but softer than she had ever seen. He took a slow breath, trying to gather his thoughts. Even he didn't fully understand what he had just witnessed. All he knew was that the sound of her playing still echoed in his mind, refusing to fade. Finally, he stepped farther into the room. "Who taught you to play like that?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. The question surprised her. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was curious. Maria hesitated. She didn't know how to explain something she hadn't spoken about in years. I learned when I was younger," she said softly. He nodded slightly, waiting for more, but she didn't continue. She kept her eyes on the floor, unsure what else to say. He glanced at the piano, then at her. "That wasn't practice," he said. "That was something else. That was." He struggled for the right word. It had been a long time since he tried to describe anything emotional. "It was real," he finished. Maria didn't know how to respond. She didn't know if he meant it as praise or criticism. Before she could speak, he said, "Play it again." Maria's eyes widened. "Sir, please," he added, surprising even himself. The hall fell silent again, but now the quiet carried a different meaning. Maria stood unsure, her heart pounding, caught between fear and the strange feeling that this moment was bigger than she understood. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a change she never expected. And Mr. Wentmore, who had lived a life built on control and certainty, was about to step into a world he didn't know he needed. Maria stood frozen, unsure what to do or say. The request felt unreal. She wasn't used to being asked for anything, let alone something like this. She had spent years trying to blend into the background, not draw attention, not cause trouble. And now the owner of the estate was asking her to play the piano again, something she hadn't expected from anyone, especially not him. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked toward the piano. The room felt different now. A few minutes ago, the hall had been a safe space, a quiet place where she could let herself breathe. But with someone watching someone like him, everything felt uncertain. I don't know if I should," she said softly, almost whispering. Mr. Wentmore stepped a little closer, but stopped at a respectful distance. His expression wasn't harsh or impatient. If anything, he looked calmer than she had ever seen him. "You're not in trouble," he said quietly. "I'm not angry. I just would like to hear it again." Maria didn't understand why he cared. She didn't understand what he had heard in her music, or why it mattered to him. But something in his voice told her he meant it. It wasn't an order. It wasn't a command. It was a human request. Even so, her heart beat fast with nerves. She slowly walked back to the piano, her steps cautious. She sat down again, her fingers brushing lightly against the smooth keys. The familiar feeling returned to comfort, the warmth, but now mixed with anxiety. She took a quiet breath and placed both hands on the keys. Before she began, she glanced at him. He stood near a column, his posture straighter than usual. His eyes focused on her like he was trying to understand something. Maria looked back at the piano and began to play. This time the notes came slower at first, as if she needed to ease herself into the moment. Her fingers hesitated before finding their rhythm, but the melody soon found its shape, rising gently through the room. The hall filled once again with soft echoes, the kind that wrapped around the walls and made the space feel warmer. Mr. Wetmore listened carefully. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He barely breathed. He simply watched and listened, trying to understand how someone who worked quietly in his home could create something this beautiful. As she played, Maria tried to forget he was there. She let the music guide her, just like before. The melody grew smoother, fuller, more expressive. She shifted slightly on the bench, finding comfort in the familiar movement. Her hands became more confident, dancing over the keys with a grace she thought she had forgotten. For a moment, she allowed herself to enjoy it. When she reached the softer part of the melody, her breath deepened. She felt the weight of her emotions again, the memories, the sadness, the hope. She didn't try to hide them this time. Maybe it was because she had nothing left to lose. Maybe it was because the music didn't lie. Her eyes closed naturally, not to avoid being seen, but because it helped her feel the notes better. She let her fingers move as they wished, following the melody she had lived through. Not just composed. Mr. Wetmore watched more closely now. He had never been a man who understood music deeply, but even he could feel something in the room. The way her fingers moved, the way her face softened, the way the sound carried emotions he couldn't name. He noticed the little details, the slight tremble of her shoulders, the gentle curve of her fingers, the softness in her expression. It struck him how much she had been hiding from the world, how much she had kept locked inside while quietly doing her daily work. She wasn't just playing music, she was telling a story. When the final notes drifted into the air, Maria let her hands rest on the keys for a moment. She slowly opened her eyes, her heart beating faster than before. She didn't turn around immediately. She didn't want to see disappointment or worse, pity, but when she finally looked at him, she saw neither. He looked, moved. Not shocked like before, not confused, but genuinely moved. He stepped forward slowly, as if he didn't want to break the silence too suddenly. "You were meant to play," he said softly. Maria felt her throat tighten. She looked down again. Compliments weren't something she heard often, and she didn't know how to accept them. "I just learned when I was young," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't just learn," he said. "You lived it. That's the difference." She didn't know how to respond. She didn't know what to do with this unexpected kindness. He moved to the side of the piano, keeping a respectful distance. "Why did you stop?" he asked gently. Maria hesitated. She didn't often talk about her past. It wasn't because she wanted to hide anything. It was because the memories were heavy, and she never felt there was a place to share them. "It got hard," she said softly. "Life changed. I had to work. Music didn't fit into that anymore." He didn't push for details. He simply nodded, as if he understood that some stories didn't need to be fully told to be felt. "You shouldn't have had to let it go," he said quietly. Maria looked at him for the first time with surprise. No one had ever said that to her. People usually told her to be realistic, to accept the life she had now, to stop dreaming of things that weren't practical. She didn't expect someone like him to say something different. Mr. Wetmore stepped back a little. "You have something special," he said. "Something many people try their whole lives to find." Maria felt warmth in her chest, and a strange uneasiness too. She didn't know what he wanted, or why this mattered to him. She didn't understand why her music felt so important to a man who lived in a world of business and structure. Before she could ask, he said, "I want to hear more." Maria blinked. "More?" Yes, he said simply. Whatever you want to play, whatever you feel. Her heart raced again. She couldn't imagine sitting there and playing one piece after another like she had time for such things. She was still working. She still had duties. And yet, something about his tone told her she wasn't being asked as an employee, but as a person. Still, she shook her head gently. I should finish my work, she said. I didn't mean to take up time. I didn't even think anyone was home. He paused for a moment, considering her words. Then he said, Your work can wait for a few minutes. This is important. Important. The word felt strange. Her music had never been important to anyone except herself. She shook her head again, softly. I don't know if I'm ready for more. He accepted that. All right, he said, but I hope you'll consider playing again. Not for the house. Not for me. For you. Maria looked away, unsure how to handle the feeling rising inside her. She didn't know what to call it. Hope? Fear? A mix of both? After a moment, she stood from the bench. I should clean the hallway, she said quietly. He nodded and stepped aside to let her pass as she walked away. Her feet felt heavy. The air around her felt different, filled with something she couldn't understand yet. She tried to clear her thoughts, tried to focus on her work again. But her mind replayed his words, the way he had looked at her, the way the room had felt while she played. She didn't know. She had opened a door she wasn't ready to walk through. She did know one thing something. Inside her had shifted, and Mr. Wetmore felt it. Too, when she disappeared down the hall, he stayed in the room for a long time, staring at the piano. He wasn't thinking about meetings or schedules. He wasn't thinking about deadlines or calls. He was thinking about her, about the music, and about why it had affected him so deeply. He didn't know it yet, but this was the start of a connection neither of them had expected. A connection that would grow quietly, changing them in ways they never imagined. The maid stood there frozen for a moment, her hands still resting softly on the edge of the piano, as if unsure whether she should step back or continue playing. The millionaire remained silent too, but his expression had changed completely. The usual strictness, the distance he carried like a shield, none of it was there. Instead, his eyes were fixed on her with a kind of quiet amazement, almost disbelief. He took a slow step closer, as though afraid that any sudden movement would break whatever moment had just unfolded between them. She felt her heart pound inside her chest, unsure whether she had made a mistake by playing in his house at all. She wondered if she had crossed a line, if she would now be scolded or even lose her job. Yet something in his face suggested otherwise. Where did you learn to play like that? He finally asked, his voice warm and surprisingly gentle. She lowered her gaze, fidgeting with her fingers. I didn't learn formally, sir. I just listened to sounds and tried to understand them. It's something I've done since I was young. He blinked, as if trying to wrap his mind around that. No teacher? No lessons? She shook her head slowly. None, sir. My family couldn't afford anything like that. But I loved the sound of the piano so much that I used to imagine the keys at night and picture how each one felt. I practiced in my mind. It sounds silly, I know. He stared at her as though she had just said something extraordinary. You practiced in your mind. He repeated the words softly, not mocking, but almost in awe. That doesn't sound silly at all. That sounds like something only someone truly gifted would even think to do. Her cheeks warmed at the unexpected praise, but she didn't know what to say. She had always kept her talent hidden, because in most homes, being a maid meant moving quietly, keeping to her duties, and never stepping into the world of the people she worked for. It wasn't her place to touch expensive instruments, especially not a piano, that probably cost more than everything she owned in her life. He walked slowly around the room, his hands behind his back, as though trying to process everything. Then he turned to her again. "Play another piece," he said softly. "Please." She hesitated. "Are you sure, sir?" "Yes," he said quickly. "I want to hear more." His tone carried something different, now a kind of excitement mixed with curiosity and even a bit of hope. She took a breath and sat again. She let her fingers hover over the keys for a moment, feeling the warmth the piano still carried from her previous performance. This time, she chose something calmer, something she had made up during long, lonely nights when she had nothing but sound to comfort her. The notes flowed gently at first, soft as falling rain, then gradually grew richer and fuller. The melody carried a story she had never told anyone, a story of hardship, patience, dreams held quietly inside, and the longing for a life beyond the limits of her circumstances. The millionaire stood completely still. He didn't move a muscle. His chest rose slowly with each breath, and his eyes never left her hands as they glided over the keys, with confidence she never thought she possessed in front of another person, not by the time she finished. The room felt warmer somehow, filled with an energy neither of them spoke of but both sensed deeply. He exhaled, a sound that was almost like a sigh. "Do you realize," he said quietly, "that you play with more soul than many of the trained musicians I've invited here?" Her eyes widened. I don't know about that, sir. I only play what I feel." He stepped closer. "That is exactly why it's remarkable. Most people play to impress. You play to express. That's rare." The words settled inside her like a soft blanket, comforting, surprising, almost unbelievable. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the realization that, for the first time, someone truly saw her music as something more than a secret hobby. After a long moment, he gently closed the piano lid. "Can you follow me for a moment?" he asked. She stood up nervously and nodded. He led her out of the room and down a bright hallway with tall windows. She had passed this hallway many times while doing her chores, but had never walked beside him like this. It made her feel oddly important, as though her role in his house had suddenly shifted to something she did not yet understand. He stopped in front of a door she had never entered. It was always locked. With a small silver key, he opened it and pushed the door wide. Inside was a room she could only describe as breathtaking. Instruments of all kinds lined the walls: violins, guitars, flutes, even a harp. Sheet music was scattered on stands, and the walls were decorated with framed photographs of concerts, orchestras, and musicians. She stepped inside slowly, afraid to touch anything. "What is this place?" He smiled faintly. "This was my wife's music room. She loved music more than anything in the world. She used to practice here every morning." His voice softened, and for the first time, she sensed a quiet sadness beneath his otherwise composed demeanor. She looked around with a newfound understanding. She must have been very talented. "She was," he said softly, "and she believed that music should be shared with everyone, no matter who they were." He paused. "I haven't opened this room for a long time. It didn't feel right. But today, hearing you play, I felt something I haven't felt in years." Her breath caught in her chest. She didn't know what to say. It wasn't her intention to stir old emotions or open wounds. But the way he spoke didn't sound painful. It sounded grateful. He walked to a shelf, picked up a small notebook, and handed it to her. This was hers. She wrote melodies and ideas in it. "I want you to have it." Her eyes widened. "Sir, I can't take this. This belongs to your family." "I'm giving it to you," he said firmly but kindly, because she would have wanted someone with genuine passion to use it. "You have a gift. Don't hide it in silence. He paused before adding softly, "She never played to impress anyone either. That's why your music reminded me of her." The maid felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She held the notebook gently, as though afraid it would crumble in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what to say. I don't think I deserve something like this." "You deserve it more than you realize," he assured her. "And if you're willing—" He hesitated for a moment, choosing his next words carefully. "I would like to hear you play more often. Not as a maid stepping out of her duty, but as someone whose music deserves to be heard." She stared at him in disbelief. "You mean, you want me to play here? In this room?" "Yes," he said with a gentle nod. "Whenever you want. You have my full permission. Think of it as your space, now as much as it was hers." The idea felt unreal. A room filled with instruments. A place meant for music, a place she never imagined she would even enter, was now being offered to her as though she belonged there. Her hands tightened around the notebook. "I don't know how to thank you, sir." "You already did," he replied with a small smile. "You thanked me the moment you touched those piano keys." For a moment, they simply stood there in the quiet room, the soft afternoon light filling the space around them. It felt peaceful, almost sacred. She felt a door inside her open one she didn't even know existed. When she finally stepped out of the music room, she felt different. She felt seen, appreciated, and for the first time in her life, she felt like her talent actually mattered. She walked down the hallway with a quiet excitement she struggled to contain. The millionaire watched her leave, a thoughtful expression on his face. Something had shifted inside him as well. The house, once filled with silence and routine, now held a spark of something new, something he hadn't felt since the days when music filled every corner. He didn't yet know what would come next. Neither did she. But both of them sensed that a new chapter had quietly begun. All because of one unexpected moment, when a maid's hidden talent reached his ears and changed everything. And as she returned to her duties that day, her steps felt lighter, her heart felt fuller, and her mind was full of melodies she couldn't wait to bring to life in the music room that now belonged to her as well. The morning after the big event, the air inside Ridgewood Estate felt different. It was quiet, but not the usual kind of quiet. It was the sort of stillness that comes after something life-changing, like the world was holding its breath for what would happen next. Maria woke early, even though she had barely slept. Her mind kept replaying the night before, the lights, the applause, the way people stood to their feet for her. She remembered the faces filled with surprise and amazement, the way the melody she played felt like it rose higher than the ceiling itself. She remembered the warmth in her chest when she finished, the weight that lifted from her heart after years of silence. But what she remembered most was the look on Mr. Wentmore's face. She had never seen him like that before. He had stared at her with this strange mix of surprise and pride, like someone who finally found something precious they didn't know they had been searching for. And then the words he had spoken to her afterward kept echoing in her head. "I want you to be heard," he had said. Those 5 words had kept her awake all night. She still wasn't sure what to think or what to feel. It was all too big, too fast. She had come to this house as a maid, someone who cleaned floors and dusted shelves. She never imagined anyone would look at her as anything more than that. And now, somehow, the most powerful man she had ever worked for was talking to her like she had a future in music again. She walked down the hallway slowly, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands still felt warm, like the piano keys had left their imprint on her skin. It didn't feel real. When she reached the grand hall, she paused at the doorway. There it was. The piano. Sunlight spilled across it, making the surface shine as if it were waiting for her. For a long moment, she simply stood there, afraid to step closer. Something inside her whispered that if she touched it now, everything from last night would come rushing back. And she wasn't sure she could hold that much emotion at once. But after a few seconds, she walked toward it. Each step felt slow, careful, almost nervous. When she reached the instrument, she brushed her fingertips across its smooth surface. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered to herself. She sat on the bench, but didn't play. She just closed her eyes and let the silence settle around her. She didn't hear Mr. Wetmore enter the hall. "It's all right to play, you know," he said gently. Maria jumped slightly. She turned to find him standing nearby, not in his usual business clothes, but in something more relaxed. He looked calmer than she had ever seen him. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean." "You don't have to explain," he said, lifting a hand. "This piano finally sounds alive again because of you." Maria dropped her gaze to the keys. "Last night felt like a dream." "It wasn't," he said. "Everyone saw what you can do. You have something rare." Maria shook her head lightly. "I'm not sure I'm ready for anything more." He stepped closer, but kept his tone gentle. "I won't force you into anything, but I want you to know that you're not alone in this anymore." Those words made her chest tighten. She had spent so many years trying to rebuild her life quietly, away from music, away from dreams she thought she had lost forever. Hearing someone speak to her like this felt strange comforting, but overwhelming. Mr. Wetmore took a slow breath. "After what happened last night, a few people reached out to me. They want to talk to you. Nothing serious, nothing rushed. Just conversations." Maria's eyes widened. "About my music?" "Yes," he nodded. "But again, only if you want it. No pressure." She felt her heartbeat pick up. She didn't know if she was ready. She didn't know if she was strong enough to step back into the world she had walked away from. But last night, she felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "Then you try again," he replied softly. "No one great starts without fear." Maria looked back at the piano. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt warm, filled with a quiet understanding that didn't need words. Then Mr. Wetmore added, "There's something else I want to talk to you about, but only when you're ready." Before she could ask, he stepped back. "Take your time. Today is yours." He started to walk away. "Sir?" Maria said softly. He turned. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." He gave her a small, genuine smile, something she had never seen from him before. "No, Maria, thank you." When he left, the hall grew quiet again. Maria looked at the keys. Her fingers hovered above them. Last night, she played for others. Today, she wanted to play for herself. She gently pressed the first key. A soft note filled the room. And once again, she began to play. Her music filled the hall with a tender warmth. It wasn't bold or grand like the night before. It was gentle, like a whisper between the walls, like a message meant only for her heart. Every note reminded her of the girl she once was, the girl who believed music could carry her through anything. She didn't know how long she played. She didn't notice when the morning sunlight slowly turned brighter. She only knew that when she finally lifted her hands from the keys, she felt lighter, like a weight she had carried for years had softened as she stood up. She noticed a small envelope placed on a nearby table. She wasn't sure if it was there earlier. She picked it up and carefully opened it. Inside was a short message. "Your journey is just beginning." No name, but she knew who had written it. She held the note to her chest and took a slow breath. Something inside her was shifting, not fast, not forced, but gently, like dawn slowly pushing night away. For the rest of the day, she finished her chores with a quiet smile. Every so often, she caught herself humming the melody she played in front of the crowd. It felt like she was learning how to breathe again. Later that evening, as she prepared to leave for the night, she passed by the grand hall one last time. The piano sat there calmly, as if waiting for her return. She gave it a soft smile. "I'll be back," she whispered Dot, and for the first time since she started working at the estate, she walked out feeling like tomorrow held something good something. She didn't need to fear Dot her life wasn't suddenly perfect. She didn't suddenly become someone new. But she was no longer the woman hiding from her past. She was someone stepping toward her future. One note at a time, Dot, and somewhere inside the grand estate, a millionaire who once lived only for business now found himself thinking of the maid who brought music back into his silent home. Dot, it was the beginning of a journey. Neither of them had expected one shaped not by money or status, but by the gentle power of talent, courage, and the moment a single melody changed everything. Their lives had crossed in the most unexpected way, and nothing would be the same again.